Yeah, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, in terms of like, I guess career-wise, or is it like, is,
Yeah, what are you doing now? A little
well,
bit career wise.
I recently graduated from Snow College in Ephraim, Utah, with a Bachelor of Music with an emphasis in commercial music degree. And since then, I've been teaching privately in Mapleton. So I've been in Mapleton, Utah. I'm so sorry I didn't clarify that. I was like,
Oh, no worries.
I'm used to,
Yeah,
yeah, just used to saying Mapleton and everybody knowing where it is, and I'm like, oh wait a minute.
yeah, it's perfectly normal, man.
Yeah, but
But
yeah.
yeah,
So I've been teaching privately up here in Mapleton for the last couple years because that was in 2019 that I graduated, and I guess recently it's just been a couple months. I've been working with a studio on a project for special needs inclusion, and then I actually just got hired on by them, and it was kind of surprising. that
oh wow, so they're actually backing the project
yeah,
or interested in backing it. That's
yeah,
good. Yeah,
they're actually having me direct it when it comes to full fruition. So it'll
that's going to
be
be great. We're going to talk about that later. I want to end with that because that's really
okay.
going to be a nice way to end the interview.
Yes, for
But
sure.
let's go ahead and jump in. I was looking through your resume and stuff like that, and you there was a program at Snow. You said Snow College.
Yes.
Yes, at Snow, the Horne Youth Conservatory of Music that
Yeah.
you were teaching at.
Yeah, that was a program for students to teach actually, and they had a whole. It was actually a paid program. So what we were doing was we were teaching, but we were getting paid through Snow College actually. So you had to submit a couple W-2 forms and stuff. But
Yes, I imagine teaching high school students, high school, middle school.
yeah, actually, that was the idea. I taught my fair share of high school students in that program.
Yeah, it's pretty neat how they have, it's really neat how they have the students going out and doing the teaching, and it's one of those things where the best way you learn is to teach. So to be able to give students the opportunity to teach and to reinforce what they're learning with their students, I think it's really neat.
Yeah, it was really neat, honestly, and it helped me understand what I was learning a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. And while we're talking about teaching, you make it very clear with your when on your website, you make it very clear that you put a large emphasis on theory. I know a lot of the piano instructors that I know kind of naturally let the piano teach theory because obviously you have like different inversions and it affects your hand motion. So being aware of those things is very helpful, and most people kind of teach it from that standpoint. But you make a very clear point to teach theory. Why is that?
I think it's very important to be aware of everything we do on the piano, just in general, because for me, I have to be aware of everything because I have to figure out how to adapt to it. And I'm coming at that from that kind of standpoint because it really helps to know everything about the piece you're playing, you know. It helps to really understand it. You understand where everything is. It really helps you get a very how shall I say it? A very potent performance. And it helps to
Yeah,
yeah, it really I guess when I was saying I focus on theory, I tell them why things happen the way they do. Just because a lot of teachers don't teach that. They teach this is the way this is. And I think a lot of them
exactly.
don't I think a lot of them don't teach why because they don't understand fully why. But for me, I'd come in and I'm like, I do understand a lot of the why behind everything, so might as well pass it on.
Yeah, it's definitely a useful trait to help develop musicianship because
Right.
my mentor told me that it's a very fine line to people who aren't musicians, but there's a clear line between performers and musicians. And, being able to teach musicianship and to develop musicians, I, I agree. I really think that's a really unique approach to teaching lessons. And then just to give the audience a bit of context, you said that you need to adapt the music. Let's back up a bit and then we'll hit that point.
Okay.
Uh, if you want, I'll go ahead and let you talk about it. I know you are disabled. If you don't mind letting the audience know, just tell us about your disability and how it affects you.
All right. So I have something called metatropic dysplasia dwarfism. And just for curiosity's sake, have you ever met a little person before?
Yes, I have. It
Okay.
was it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
All right. So you know kind of what we look like and you know what kind of struggles we face, or you can kind of ascertain some of the struggles.
Yeah.
How, however, for me, it's a little bit different because my dwarfism is very much like really rare compared to the ones you've seen. I'm sure you've probably seen the people with longer torsos and shorter legs and arms, right?
Yes.
For me, I have longer legs, kind of kind of caved in torso with some shorter arms, but the fingers kind of remain the same here. I have very kind of, I'm gonna say it, pudgy fingers. I have some very pudgy fingers, and it makes it hard for me to reach certain intervals. Like I think in college I played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C sharp minor, and honestly, with that piece, it it's really built for a bigger hand than most normal people actually, because if you know music history very well, Rachmaninoff had some enormous hands, like absolutely gigantic, and most of the time he wrote his pieces for himself. He didn't think someone else would play it, and then
Yeah.
and then I came in and did it in college, and I had to really figure out what notes were most important. Like, because I guess one of my music professors taught me was not all notes are created equal.
Yes. And I know you know that as a composer as well.
Oh yeah, but yeah, for that kind of thing, I had to think because I'm like I can't reach all the notes. Obviously, if you look at my hands here, it's it can be kind of difficult for me to reach a lot of stuff on the keyboard. But naturally, I've had to adapt. And honestly, my mentor was my grandma, and she taught me for free pretty much because it's passing it down the bloodline kind of thing. But she had to actually let me figure it out for myself. And I'm gonna admit, it was really rough actually figuring that out for the first couple of years. But as I was doing it, it actually became more natural for me to figure out what to do to adapt. But something I've also found is the more I stretch on the piano, the more my fingers. Yeah.
Hmm. That's interesting. And I've really liked the approach of, using theory because I mean, you have
Yes.
a physical disability that is limiting you. So, you know,
Yeah.
it it it's really heartwarming that, this is something that you have to use and you're still teaching it to your students who are fully capable
Yes.
and really giving them that ability to exercise musicianship. Because I mean, even with Rachmaninoff, I mean, regardless, people still have to drop notes because his hands were massive, and
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to discern what notes to choose
Cover
and what notes to
to
leave out,
portray or to
still
convey
challenging,
the
especially when you
message
have
of the
such
harmony that you want to
full
portray to the
textures just
audience.
because of how large his
Because
hands are and how
that's the most
capable he
important
can be
thing.
with his
If you're
hands.
trying to convey a message of like harmony in your piece and cover to portray or to convey the message of the harmony that you want to portray to the audience. Because that's the most important thing. If you're trying to convey a message of like harmony in your piece, you have to make sure that you cover like every note in the chord to make sure they know exactly what kind of chord you're doing. Because
Right.
obviously some intervals it's going to be very hard to tell because like I'm trying to think C to an E in one octave could be any number of chords. you know it could be any kind of 20th century chord that's like completely obscure that no one knows what the heck it is.
Oh
or
yeah.
or it could be something simple and they would never know because it's not made clear. But if but if you figure out what kind of notes you want to cover in the chord, then that really helps. It really helps for them to figure out what kind of feeling you're trying to portray.
Exactly. Well agreed. Yep. Now while we're still on this topic, tell us a little bit about the Joyce Walsh uh Junior Division Disability Award
Well,
and the
that
National Federation of
uh,
Music Clubs.
oh yeah. So the National Federation of Music Clubs is kind of a music teachers union. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. Like, I'm pretty sure they have them out east, right?
Yeah, I we're more familiar with NAFME.
Oh yes, I've heard
Yeah.
of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the main teachers union out here on the East Coast.
Oh, cool. Because yeah, they came by Snow College one time. I remember that, and one of my professors was kind of a chapter leader in that, or something like that. But what? But the National Federation of Music Clubs is kind of like that. It's a national level organization. And as for the Joyce Walsh Junior Disability Award, that was meant for kids in high school or anywhere before to enter into that had a certain disability um, that were musicians. So like if it were like a violist or possibly a flautist, they could enter in if they had a disability. Honestly, it was a lot of it was it could have been anyone from with any instrument actually. So any disability, any instrument was welcome to participate. But yeah, it was kind of rough preparing for it because my grandma noticed this competition and she's like, Colton, you can enter into this. I'm like, okay. At first I was like, okay. And this was like for 3 years in a row, actually. And she would, first year I was kind of like, okay, I'll do it just because grandma's telling me to do it.
Yeah.
And we do what grandma says. Otherwise she's like, okay, that's it. You better do this now. It was less of a, I'm gonna say it was less of a request and more of a command since I was family. So
Oh yeah, it's one of those I'm telling you you can do it, but I actually mean you need to do this.
yes, more like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how things went when I was in high school. Though it was so much fun. But yeah, so what happened was she entered me in, and we sent in the recording. I didn't know what to think. I was just like, okay, I'm getting a little nervous. I have never heard of this award before, but when you enter into a competition like that, it gets you a little bit nervous, no matter if you know what it is or not. You're like, this is providing an unneeded amount of stress, and it's making my
Yes.
nerves tingle on end, kind of like a spidey sense kind of thing. But yeah, it made me nervous, and then honestly, Grandma called me a couple of times when she found out, and she's like, "You ready to hear this, Colton?" First couple of times it was Western Region national winner, and then the last time I was on my way home from Disneyland when I got the call. She's like, "Colton, we got the results, and are you ready?" She's like, "I'm like, yeah." She's like, "Are you sitting down?" I'm like, "Yeah," and she's like, "You won first place national." So that,
Wow.
yeah,
That's impressive, especially at a high school level to have that national recognition.
yeah, it was pretty neat. And then I guess in college, it was like I didn't make that big of a deal out of it in college. After that, I just kind of went along because I figured out how small of a fish I was in such a big pond. Because when your grandma tells you you do a good job and stuff, you take it and you're like, okay, but like you kind of run with it when you're a kid. But when you get into college and you look around at like all the other musicians, you're comparing yourself to them and going, I'm a small fish in this enormous lake.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was weird though. After that, I started going to college and figuring my life out that way. And I did a music theory competition actually, which I'm still trying to figure out what that was. I have no idea, but it was something my theory teacher recommended to me to do. And me and another guy did it, and it was a national competition too. And it was just a national theory competition. So we were, it was kind of a test actually. to see how fast we could comprehend it. And they gave us extra points for actually doing the test over again.
Oh, nice.
And me and this other guy were doing it over and over again, and I don't think anybody else got it. I think they all thought they could do it once and everything and be fine. But me and this other guy just kept doing it over and over again, trying to perfect it. And honestly, I spent nights trying to get ahead of this guy. And as soon as I got ahead of him, I'm like, oh crap, now the pressure's on.
Yep.
Because me and this guy were actually pretty big rivals for that. I knew who he was, and we had both met in person, and he was actually a classmate of mine. So, and he and I were both going head to head at that, and it was so funny. I think after a while, people figured it out, but they just kind of gave up for whatever reason. Because like they had like these kind of bar graphs. So they had a couple of the people, they went up a little bit of a way, and then they had me and Anthony, and we were like towering above them with this kind of. And we looked at the results and we're like, okay, wow. It was like college level theory kind of thing, and we were both kind of just staring at each other. We video conferenced. He's like, Colton, are you seeing these results? I'm like, yeah, I am, and it's kind of scaring me a little bit. He's like, dude, we were just doing this like we didn't know what was going on. And like, I was doing it blindly. I was just doing it over and over again. All I thought was, beat Anthony, beat Anthony, beat Anthony.
Yeah, it's nice to have that, that healthy friendship rivalry going.
Yeah, it was way too funny though. I told my theory professor about it, and he's like, so what were you thinking when you were doing that over and over again? I was like, I don't know. I was thinking, Anthony's ahead of me. I have to beat the living crap out of him with this.
Oh, man. That's too funny.
Yeah, it was a funny time in my life.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of education, let's talk about the differences that you've experienced between grade school education and your undergraduate studies.
Okay. Wow, it's actually a pretty stark contrast with that. Because with my elementary school kind of childhood studies, the best education I got was actually from my grandmother. She taught me a lot about music because most of the time in my school, at least, they didn't really focus on private lessons or anything. You had to get that outside of school. Like they didn't figure out how to offer that even for the band students.
Yeah.
It was like very minimal music education because honestly, our school focused all on football. And I'm going to say it, our football team sucked. If my old principal heard that, he'd just stare at me like, so much for school spirit, huh? I'm like, I'm saying that because honestly, they really did. They focused all their attention, all their time on that. And the stages were just in so much disrepair. I noticed like scrapes across the stage and everything. And it really, when I look back, I'm like, if that were me today looking through that, I would be appalled, honestly, at the low kind of attention given to music education and just education in the arts in general. Because we needed new instruments and we couldn't get them. We needed new rooms for stuff and we couldn't get them because our administration didn't want to focus on that. And honestly, that was my experience with it. Most of my theory and everything, as a child, I learned from my grandmother. And I was actually a step above most of the kids in the choir. Like, we were taking a theory test. Most of them took like 5 minutes on this interval quiz. Me and Taylor just looked at each other. We're like, it's me and my little brother. So we were like, we had both been taking from our grandma for almost equally as long. And I just stared at him like, how fast do you think we can do this test? He's like, want to try? And we do it in like a fraction of the time that everyone else is doing it, and we hand it in. We're like, done. Our choir director looks at it and they're like, well, I'm not surprised. She looks at us and she's like, well, I'm not surprised you guys totally aced this thing in 0 to 60. Like, yeah, we're kind of that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, especially having all that private training.
Yeah, it really helped. And honestly, I looked around and I'm like, I felt looking back, I'm like, if I, for the most part, it felt good just to be on top of the world kind of thing, but still, if I were to look
Yeah.
back at that, I'd be like, this is kind of sad because it was a small town. In small towns, music education is kind of thrown out the window, unfortunately. So, in most small towns, that's the experience I had anyway.
Yeah,
And
and based on those experiences, what are some of the things that you saw that you could see improvement in terms of inclusion, in terms of not only inclusion of disabilities, like people with disabilities, physical, mental disabilities, but also to school administrations who where their music department feels excluded.
well, honestly, I think from my understanding, there are quite a few schools that have an arts focused education. And I really applaud that. Like, seriously, it's amazing to see that just kind of evolve. But for the ones that don't, I'm like, they're living in a false reality where they think that's not needed. They think like math and stuff, like all the core stuff, like the supposedly core stuff, math, English, history, all that stuff, and science, they think that's all core. What they don't realize is that other types of education are pretty core too. Like stuff like music, art, acting, any one of those, honestly, they're pretty core to students because that's the time they're trying to figure out what they want to be or like who they want to be as people and giving all sorts of talents a chance in this middle school, elementary school educations. I really don't think they focus on that enough. And I think it's something that needs to happen. It needs to be more brought to the attention of school administrations because middle school, elementary school educations, I really don't think they focus on that enough. And I think it's something that needs to happen. It needs to be more brought to the attention of school administrations because honestly, every kid resonates with something different. They resonate with a different art. They resonate with a different skill. And they have to figure that out for themselves. And whatever the school administrations can do to help them figure that out, they need to do. But that's just my experience with the childhood education of music. But as opposed to when I got to college and I started learning, though, wow, that was amazing because they were completely focused on the arts, completely focused on music. And I was blown away and I absolutely loved it because it was a breath of fresh air, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, let's though when we were talking, you were talking about just some struggles you had in terms of inclusion. I mean, you struggle with dwarfism, you have a physical disability, and there were
Yeah.
some inclusion issues that we had talked about. What are some things that you would recommend to music teachers to help close that gap and to make sure that everybody feels included and everybody has a chance, a fair
Well,
chance?
I'm going to say one thing because there's something that everyone can do to figure that kind of thing out, and that is take the time to get to know the student. Really take the time to understand them. I got really lucky with my grandma because she took the time to understand what my limitations were and how much they really limited me. She took the time to figure that out and really understand how to teach me correctly. And it took a while, but she did it. And I am where I am today because of her, because she took the time to understand me, because she took the time to really listen without talking or speaking, or I guess speaking or physically listening. She took the time to really understand what was going on with me because she wasn't listening to me talk. She was listening to my body speak because, our bodies speak too. They speak in a very different way, but when we're doing stuff and people are watching, that's sending a message. It's sending a message to them about what we're capable of. And for me, my grandma really took the time to listen to that kind of language. And she's really good at understanding that kind of body language. And she came to understand what I was capable of. And she knew that honestly, I didn't know what I was capable of back then. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't know what I'm capable of now. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
she really took the time to understand that. And I think a lot of music teachers don't take the time to understand their students that way. They aren't willing to take the time because they think it takes, they think it like they're scared to do it. You know,
Mm.
they think it takes more than what they've got. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I think everyone is capable of understanding one another. Everyone is capable of understanding their student. And it takes time, but it's possible. And in the long run, when you figure out what they're capable of, because you help them come to a sense of their own power and help them be able to find their own happiness, because they're figuring out their identity and you have guided them to that. Or when you figure out what they're capable of, because you help them come to a sense of their own power and help them be able to find their own happiness, because they're figuring out their identity and you have guided them to that. Or you have helped guide them along the road to finding their identity.
If you're a music educator, rewind back about 2 or 3 minutes and listen to that part again. That was powerful. Like I'm getting ready to start teaching myself. I'm going to be teaching high school, and
Uh-huh.
it's one of those things that honestly I had a personal fear of, and it's not like, oh, it was just like, how do I make sure that if I have somebody who has any type of conflict, whether it be a disability, whether it be like a home situation that affects their schoolwork, what how do I make sure that I make them feel included? And I know personally that was one of my fears, is like, what if I can't do anything? But it's enlightening to see that perspective of just there's always something we can do.
Yeah. And honestly, in terms of people with disabilities, there is such a wide spectrum of what we're capable of. Like, there's severity in certain disabilities. Like for dwarfism, it's a very wide spectrum, just as with any disability of what we're capable of when we're born. And really it really takes time to figure that kind of thing out with any student. I'm like, but with the ones that don't have a disability, it's easier to figure out. But for anyone with that kind of thing, that going for them, I think it's important that you take the time to really focus on helping them figure it out, because they'll appreciate that. Sure, it'll make other students think, oh, that they're the teacher's pet and whatnot, But honestly, if they need that, take the time to help them figure it out, you know, because chances are they'll come to you for someone they trust. They'll see you as a person they trust eventually for this, and they will appreciate you so much more. They will come to you for figuring out what they're capable of. But, you have to actually, it takes looking around the room and observing everybody and figuring out, like, what they're capable of, what job will give them the most satisfaction.
Yeah, and
Because
it's oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because it's really important that everyone feels included and everyone feels like they're doing something important for them. Because a lot of the time in arts education, I'm sure you'll notice some special needs student doing something that doesn't seem like it speaks to their talents so much. It's like a medial task, And that's kind of what I want to stop. I want to be able to help them understand their strengths. I want to take the time to help them understand where they stand in the world, where they can make the most difference. Because I know that some people with mental disabilities have a rough time communicating the way we do, but they still communicate. They still have a voice. It's not vocal or anything, but they still communicate. And for me personally, I can hear that voice. I can kind of hear in a different way, and I hear what they're saying, and it's like a lot of them are saying we're suffering because no one really takes the time to understand what we're capable of. You know, it's
Yeah.
really kind of debilitating and demeaning. It's terrible that they're going through that, and I want to change that kind of view in the music industry with that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a perfect time. At the beginning of the episode, you were mentioning that you were contracted by a studio and that they were willing to support you on a project. And
Yes.
let's talk about this project. Just give us some background. Give us some background and what you hope to accomplish with this.
All right. So this project is called the Lilliput Sunshine Club right now, and I know Lilliput sounds like a weird name, and I'm going to explain what that is actually. So to start off, sorry, I'm a bit congested.
No, no, you're fine.
Yeah, so start off, the name Lilliput comes from a Romanian troupe of performers with types of dwarfism. So if you look up the Ovitz family, you can find them, find pictures of them anyway. And they were all little people during World War II, and they are survivors of the Holocaust. Obviously, given the nature of their disability, it attracted the attention of Dr. Mengele, who made them a part of what he called of what they considered to be his freak show. He experimented on them and humiliated them on a stage, and they went through so much that way. And despite that, they came out on top. They survived all that, and they continued performing until they all passed away of old age. And I find that really kind of I find that to be very sobering for me because I have a type of dwarfism, and in a way people like me and all others with with uh, dwarfism, we're kind of a very tight knit community. Here in Utah anyway, we know each other well, and we're kind of a people. So when I saw that, it struck a chord like really hard. But anyway, for this, I'm rambling on about that, or about the inspiration for the name. Uh,
No, you're
so
fine. It's good that it's one of the few things. It's nice to have the insight to
yeah,
understand where this was birthed from and where you got your inspiration from.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, the program is going to be focusing specifically on including people with disabilities at first. And what we're planning on doing is growing and eventually having people from all backgrounds who have felt they have been denied a music education for certain reasons to come in. Because this is supposed to be about inclusion. Therefore, we don't want to exclude anybody. And we don't want to exclude any art that feels they want to be included. Which is why, for this, I'm including every art that's offered at the studio, because it's not just music that's offered at the studio for lessons. There is acting, there's music production, there's vocals. It's not just, well, I guess I could say there's also art involved too. So it's just everything, every kind of creative art. Because what we aim to do is include, and that means everything. And but first we want to focus more on people with disabilities, because I feel like a lot of us are denied that opportunity because educators can't either aren't willing to, or can't figure have the or don't have the time to figure it out. And we want to take the time to do that, and that's kind of what we're hoping to do, what we're hoping to accomplish. And eventually, with the start of this program, I actually am aiming to start something else too, because obviously obviously I want this to grow and everything, but what I'm hoping this results in is a change in the music industry itself. I'm hoping that it results in maybe music educators being able to get a license for certified be certified to teach this sort of thing, you know? Actually have a way for them to feel confident with this. Because I think most music educators don't feel confident. They feel like it requires more certified hands, you know? Because obviously dealing with disabilities on a certain way requires certification because, you know, it requires gentle hands. It requires hands that understand how to handle situations with people with certain disabilities. You know, it takes a lot of work, and what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to maybe have more of a focus on this to where people of all abilities can come in. And I want, because you hear about people with disabilities being able to play amazingly, right? You hear about that kind of thing coming out of the woodwork a lot, but it's very not so commonplace to hear about that. And
Right.
my goal is to make it more commonplace. I want there to be more of this. I want there to be more people doing it to where, you know, to where it's just kind of the norm and it's thought of as normal. And I think it can become that, but it's something we need to work on. We need to work on inclusion a lot until then because I think a lot of music educators don't see that problem or they don't see it as a problem. But I think it needs to be heavily emphasized for the next years or so. I'm like, and honestly, I don't care if it takes me until the day I die to make this happen. I am intent on doing that.
Yeah, and you know, somebody has to speak up, and
Yes,
I really hope this project gets to become a regional or a national establishment because this is something that really does have the potential to make a difference, and
it
especially
does.
starting with special needs, but also you mentioned just people who were just denied that experience
Yeah, or people that
because
have felt denied anyway.
yeah, because I mean, my own background, I was kind of in a I came from a very unsupportive community, but we had a performing arts school, and I was fortunate enough. My mother worked for the school board, and when I told her I wanted to do music, she made sure that I made it to that school,
Wow.
and it made a big difference, and just that that just that idea just really resonates with me because I mean having a band concert with only the parents out in the
Meaning
audience,
to what we do.
when you begin to
And
realize that it
honestly, I've
hurts,
felt that
that
way
your own
in the
your own
community I live in
administration, that
because,
members
you
of
know,
your
I'm a music
community,
educator in a small town. It's
public
not as
office,
small as
none of them.
where I grew up, but it's still very, people don't take notice of that kind of thing. And they don't take notice of those kinds of problems because they feel like something is more important than you know? It really does hurt. And
It,
it's very demeaning to what we do. And honestly, I've felt that way in the community I live in because, you know, I'm a music educator in a small town. It's not as small as where I grew up, but it's still very small. And for a while, I've looked around and, you know, in small towns, if you can't work the land, you are not respected or you don't feel respected anyway because it's something everybody does and something everybody's done for probably generations, you know? But and if you can't do that or if you're new, you it's like they don't respect you as much and they look down on you in a little bit. And that's natural to happen.
yeah,
And I don't know if you've heard of the term ableism before. Have you?
I've heard of it. I I don't know exactly what it comprises of. Like I have the gist of it, but if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind explaining that just for anybody who might not know.
All right. Well, it's kind of like a discrimination kind of thing against people like that have a disability. So it's like ableism is favoritism towards people able-bodied, able-minded. And
Gotcha.
it can be really hurtful and honestly, I've noticed in small towns that it happens more often than not, and most people don't see it as a problem. And most of the time, when you see parents um, placing limitations, like telling kids with disabilities they can't do this or anything like that, or when you see them placing bars around these kids because they don't understand, that is very ableist behavior, and it happens more often in small towns, and it's hurtful. It is extremely hurtful for kids with disabilities because they feel like they're being excluded. And that's exactly what's happening, and despite the parents not knowing. Because the parents obviously think they do it out of love to prevent the child from being hurt, you know? But it's more detrimental to the child's growth than anything. And that's a behavior I want to kind of eradicate from society in general.
Yeah.
I want to see parents fostering more independence because I was lucky enough to be born into a family where my parents had me figure things out like that. They had me figure out how to dress myself when I was younger. Had me figure out how to feed myself because I had to. They recognized that, and it was honestly it was the best thing for me to figure all that out. They figured out how they were spending time having me figure out how to gain my freedom. And even today, they're helping me with that because obviously there's a lot that needs to be done for me to figure out how to live on my own, how to get transport on my own. You know, it takes a lot. But honestly, fostering that kind of feeling of independence is worth the work. It's worth what you put into it because eventually that child will look at you and go, "Thank you for doing this for me because I feel good when I do this, you know? I feel good when I do this on my own." And that could be said for anybody. I mean, you probably felt good when you moved into your first apartment, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, you felt like it was nice being away from your parents, you know, nice being able to live on your own and figure out how you can make your own mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a feeling I want to foster more in people with disabilities, and I think that doing this program will help that. It'll help them come to a sense of their own power and help them just make it more of an effort to become more independent. And part of that's kind of the deeper goal that I have because I know what independence can do for a person's mental state, and it's nothing but positive.
Yeah, and that's even inside and outside of disabilities to be able to
Yeah,
encourage people to take their own steps.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think in general it'll help society even more because I mean, government wise, you see people taking food stamps and stuff. You know, I don't like getting
Yeah.
political here, but you know, dependence leads to a lot of power given to the wrong people. And if this helps with everyone feeling more independent and coming to a sense of their own power, then I think it will change society in general, and it'll help them realize we can't depend on others to give us what we need. We need to take this for ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting pretty close to time. So I did want to ask really quick, where are you at in the process of the Lilliput Sunshine Club? I know it's not open, but when do you expect for this to be open and to have any type of media that I can share with the viewers of the podcast?
All right. Well, we're gonna be open for enrollment come November, actually. And right now we're just trying to get the word out there. We don't have any media about it yet, but what we're hoping to do is have it by November. We're hoping to start what do you call it? The enrollment process. But right now we are heavily focusing on fundraising because obviously programs like this require a lot of funding. We require funding for instruments, funding for certified consultants to come in and help us with this sort of thing. We
Right.
require funding for planning activities, even, you know? It requires a lot of work to figure all this out, and it takes a lot of time to figure it out. But honestly, we're just looking for fundraising right now, and I did get your message about the 501c thing, and I
Yeah.
think I know you probably talked to some of my colleagues in the ADM kind of thing. Have you talked to them before?
No, I have not.
Okay, it's the Association of Disabled Musicians, and um, we're kind of aiming to do the same thing and represent more disabled musicians in that way. But what we're but this for this program, it's I've been reaching out trying to help understand how I can get funding, and right now we have a promising lead on that. We have a we have a person that's willing to help us plan an event to fundraise. But anything anyone can do to help us fundraise, like get awareness that this is going on, because that's the first thing we need to do. We need
Right.
to get awareness of the cause, and after that, that's when we can really start focusing on fundraising. We just need to start spreading the word and telling people about this, because as soon as we get the word out, we can start we can start fundraising and figuring out exactly how much we're going to need.
Yeah. And then as soon as you get a website or any type of social media up, anything that I can share, please send it to me so I can update this video and I can start blasting it myself. I personally don't think I know anybody over in Utah, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard it's a theory called the 6 degrees of bacon. So pretty
Yeah.
much, yeah, yeah. So pretty much, you are associated with any person in the world, but it only takes it takes less than 6 people. So like let's say, like for example, with the two of us, uh I have a friend that I met, and that friend knows Colton. So that's 1 degree. So between any two people, there's less than there's no more than 6 people that you can associate with any person in the world. So,
Yes.
I'm hoping that through that, you know, I definitely want to push that and promote that and spread. And no, I hope it brings not only a national awareness because of how far spread everybody is, but also I hope it, you know, somebody thinks of, somebody in that area and says, hey, check this out, spread the word about this.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, that would be great actually. And that's it's actually what I'm hoping to do, honestly. I'm just kind of spreading the word everywhere I can. And I'm like, I know some people aren't in Utah, but the best thing we can do right now is spread awareness. And I think the best way to do that, especially with this podcast, I'm hoping that people take this program seriously, because when I post about it on Facebook, I don't get the feeling that people that like it are taking it very seriously. And I'm like, I need to raise more awareness. And I think if people see me vocally talking about it, I think that will help raise awareness more that this is
Yeah.
a serious thing, that this is something I want to get out there. So if if you get like a link to this podcast for me up, that'd be great, because I want to be able to share it on Facebook with people from Utah.
Yep.
And
I'll get
I
that to you as soon as possible.
great. And I think that it'll help to expand the audience for the program while also expanding your own audience. So
Yeah.
either way,
With
this will work in our favor.
Yeah, and we both have causes bigger than ourselves because I don't know if I told you explicitly, but the Brave New Sound is focused on all the because I mean music has been made so accessible in the past 20 years that
Yeah.
it literally the entire landscape of music has changed. I mean, you have people of color entering the field and being recognized professionally. You have the LGBTQ community being recognized professionally. And there's all of these communities that's always been excluded because we've never been given access. And now that we have the tools to do it by ourselves, we're out there doing that. And we both share the same thing here because like I want to give the disabled community a voice to not only impact music education, but to raise awareness that hey, there are people that are capable. There are musicians that are ready to shape the world. They just don't operate the same way that we do.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's one of the neat things about how our two projects overlap.
Yes, exactly. And I think if we raise awareness to this cause, I think that it'll grant music educators a certain level of courage to figuring this out because they'll figure out, hey, this is possible, and we need to make it more commonplace.
Exactly.
And honestly, I think that'd be just great too because seeing this happen, I think would make me very happy. And if I'm being honest, it may take beyond my lifetime, but what the heck? I'm willing to see it through as much as I can.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately we're coming up on time. I may have to bring you
Okay.
back, especially like after you get things started and so now we can start talking about how things are going.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, but to go ahead and wrap this up, I have a couple of questions just for people to get to know you personally. So
Okay.
the first question I have is what's an interesting hobby nobody would expect you to have?
Well, let's see. I'm kind of a big nerd actually. So, have you ever heard of Magic the Gathering before?
Yes.
I am a big. I'm a pretty big MTG player actually. I have like several decks below here that I play with. I'm
Yep.
like,
And then just for the
oh,
audience that doesn't know, can you just give like a general explanation of it?
okay. So, Magic the Gathering is a card game, and most of the people will call it the first trading card game because it came out before stuff like you've heard of Pokemon trading cards, Yu-Gi-Oh
Mm.
trading cards. It came out before all that. Like actually the year I was born, so 1993, it came out, and it was kind of it's kind of a convoluted game. I'm going to say that because it has certain rules in it, but every card can bend the rules in some way or another,
Oh
and
yeah.
it you have cards that make it impossible for your opponent to do a thing. And it's like just absolutely convoluted, but I have fun doing that. I feel a certain sense of retribution when I get to do that to my opponents. Like
Oh yeah.
vengeance, vengeance is sweet, and, and this is mine to enjoy right now.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a weird hobby that I have, and I'm pretty sure no one would ever expect me to have that, especially within my family. Like they're like, okay, we did not expect Colton to have this weird hobby that
Oh
of
yeah.
collecting Magic the Gathering cards.
Yeah. So what about either a piece or a song that everybody should listen to?
Well, piece or a song. So honestly, for me, I like playing the Raindrop Prelude by Chopin. It's very, I'm gonna say very expressive. I don't know if you've heard of that piece before.
I know I can't recall the piece, but I feel like I've heard it. I feel like
Yeah,
I've heard of it at least.
yeah, it's a very kind of peaceful piece though. So it, the left hand in it, it's a piano piece. So the left hand in it is not as emphasized because it's the raindrop prelude is meant to simulate raindrops. So that's what the left hand's doing, while the right hand is doing the melody. So you have kind of the left hand in the background doing that, while the right hand is heavily emphasized with melody.
Right.
And I like that because it helps people understand how to emphasize certain things over another. And, and that's one thing in music that you have to learn because you can't just bang out stuff. There's a certain um, nuances that help you really understand it.
Right.
And learning how to emphasize is very important.
Yeah, very much so. All right, what about a book everyone should read?
Hmm. A book everyone should read. I have one that's called Lincoln on Leadership, actually. And honestly, President Lincoln's one of my favorite presidents. I really like what he stood for back in the day and how he kind of went against conventions. You know,
Yeah.
he went against a lot of things that were just commonplace and did what he thought was right.
Yeah, and then just a really quick sidetrack. In a lot of the marketing a lot of the marketing seminars and stuff I've been attending, it's funny because back then it was just like a repulsive thing to go against the trend, but now that's what everybody's looking for. Something new that goes against the grain, and that's really what's turning the economy up. That's really what's turning the market upside down. So it's
Oh
kind
yeah.
of it's interesting how these historic books or books on historic figures and how they went against the trends are just popping back up, and everybody's using these as a source of inspiration to do what they did, but get a positive reception from it, unlike the people who had to go through the persecution to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a lot more back then for there was a lot more persecution for that kind of behavior back then.
For sure.
But,
Yeah.
and I like that that kind of thinking's dying down now, you know?
It's like it tradition is important, but it's not more important than the people that are here now.
Yes, exactly. Live for the here and now. Don't live for the
Exactly.
past, don't live for the future. Live for right now.
Exactly. What about a quote everybody should hear?
I gotta think. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out what questions, the get to know you questions, I thought of this one, and it's something that not a lot of people get asked. So I'm really interested to hear your response.
Well, a quote that everyone I think should listen to is there's a have you ever seen Meet the Robinsons?
No, I have not. I'm not a big
Okay,
movie
that
person, but I
all
do.
right.
Yeah.
Well, you've heard of Walt Disney though, I'm sure,
Yes.
right? Well, he had a quote in that movie that said, it was like at the very end, it was a whole big paragraph that honestly I didn't bother memorizing at first, but there were three words that I felt were really important. Keep moving forward. Because honestly, that's all you can do. That's all within your control. Because as much as everything there's so much that's beyond your control. If you worry about all that, there is no way that you can accomplish what you want to. You
Right.
have to focus on the here and now and focus on what's right in front of you. Don't don't be looking ahead or anything or trying to look ahead because you won't see anything. And don't look back because you'll focus too much on what happened and you'll feel remorseful. You'll feel the pain of what you've lost. All you can do is focus on what's right in front of you, and that's all you should focus on.
Yeah. And then my last question for you is, what's some advice about anything? Anything. It doesn't have to be about music or, anything. What's some advice that you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, coming back to what we talked about, learn to listen. Learn to really listen, not listen to respond. Listen to people as they are speaking, no matter which way they're speaking. Because obviously there are ways that there are languages that are spoken that are not verbal, you know? Just really learn to listen and understand so that you can help people understand their capabilities. Because that's the most important thing I want people to take away from the program I'm trying to develop. Learn to listen and really listen.
Yes. And once again, Colton, thank you so much. This has really been an eye-opening interview for myself, and I'm sure the audience will gain a lot from this. So thank you once again for coming. I appreciate you.
No problem. Well, thank you for having me. This has been truly an honor.
Yes. So you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you a little bit later.
All right, talk to you later.